This is the City of Buckeye Council Workshop for September 16, 2025. We have the roll call, please.
Councilmember Yonker.
Here.
Councilmember Berry is absent. Councilmember Raymond.
Present.
Councilmember Hegestead.
Here.
Councilmember Beard. Vice Mayor Eustace is absent. Mayor Wishler.
Present. Thank you very much. Item 2A, presentation and discussion of that draft housing action plan. We have about an hour for this. It's planned. Ms. Andrea Marquez, you're presenting.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. My name is Andrea Marquez, Senior Planner with Development Services. Joining me today is Lainey Corey, and also on our team is Michael White, who couldn't be with us today with Matrix Design Group. There are project planners helping us guide us through this process. So, as you guys know, we are working on the Housing Action Plan, which is our roadmap for how Buckeye will be addressing the housing needs now and into the future. This plan is required by the state and supports City Council's strategic goals as well, the big picture. So we kicked off things with the housing needs assessment, which we reported at the beginning of the year to the Arizona Department of Housing. We are fortunate that we did receive a grant from MAG to fund the Housing Action Plan, the draft that you'll be seeing tonight. This is a collab effort between Matrix, through MAG, Community Services, and our Neighborhood Services, alongside with Development Services. The document that you received is in second draft, so staff is currently reviewing and providing more comments and revisions. And we've also received feedback from Economic Development, Legal, Planning and Zoning Commission, received an email from the public, and also from the Home Builders Association. So today staff is asking Council's feedback on the draft plan. Does Council support the proposed policy direction? Are there any priorities that you would like to see? And also the final draft will come before Council for final adoption at a later date. And right now, I'm going to be handing it over to Lainey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Lainey Corey. I am a planner with Matrix. As Andrea mentioned, we are working on behalf of the city to facilitate and develop the Housing Needs Assessment and Action Plan. She provided a phenomenal introduction to this project already, but it is grant funded through MAG, and so this is really an effort to make housing and housing studies a priority across the valley. And so MAG has had some gracious funders who have been able to provide assistance in supporting communities in the Phoenix region. So our agenda today, we'll start out with a little bit of an introduction, and we'll go over really what this project is. We'll go a little bit deeper in. We'll start talking about phase one, which we call the Housing Needs Assessment, and so that's really that quantitative piece of the report. Kind of gives us insight into the data, statistics, gives us really a snapshot of what housing looks like in the community. From there, we'll kind of share some of our takeaways on those existing conditions there. We also had a pretty robust community engagement effort for this project, and so we'll detail some of those methods and engagements later on in the presentation. And then from there, between the quantitative piece of the report and then that qualitative piece, which is engaging directly with residents, understanding those lived experiences. That's how we developed the Housing Action Plan. And as Andrea mentioned, this is still in draft form, and so we're looking today for some feedback on those recommendations. There will also be an implementation plan as a part of this report, and so what we as Matrix would really like to do is understand from Council where those priorities really are and how we can identify some things like potentially funding mechanisms to really put those policies into action. And I apologize a little bit for the formatting here. Shifted around a bit when we moved it over, but our goals today, as we mentioned, really understanding what this effort is about. We would love to get some feedback from you all on the draft plan, looking again to those implementation priorities, and then understanding what those next steps look like for staff. Again, formatting shifted a little bit there, so I appreciate your patience. But so this really has three large phases. So that first piece is going to be that quantitative analysis. So we're looking at demographics, we're looking at economics, we're looking at projections. We're looking at really what those housing characteristics in that stock looks like. That helps us understand really what the composition currently looks like. So this is all present tense and in the past. We look at the housing market demand. As you all are aware, Buckeye is one of the fastest growing communities in the nation, and so that certainly dictates a lot of the different types of housing that we're seeing come about. And so we really want to take all of these factors and considerations in to make sure that any sort of policy or recommendation that we're providing in the plan is in line with Buckeye's anticipated growth. There's also a site suitability analysis that is done as a part of this effort. And so what we look at is we see all of the different parcels here in Buckeye, and we measure them up against a number of factors. So if there's existing utilities on the site, if it has connections to existing major transportation networks, and we score them based on ease of developability. And so really what that might be is that could turn into potentially a tool so that as Buckeye staff work with those seeking some work in the housing space and developing in Buckeye, finding really those ideal spaces and opportunities to build. Again, the community engagement, we had a really fantastic outreach. It was really important that we had an understanding of lived experiences when it came to housing. So the data can tell us one thing, but going to the community helps us really backfill and understand those gaps. What are we missing here? And so we had some fantastic feedback from residents, stakeholders, business owners. And then lastly, that third phase is going to be the housing action plan. And so that's really the policy piece behind it, where we look at, okay, how do we put these into action? What are the funding mechanisms that can help us accelerate some of these processes?
But before you go on, are you going to unpack each one of those?
We will,
Okay.
yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to kind of set some expectations for what this report will and will not cover. So this report really shoots to understand where those rising housing costs are. Right now, some of our existing conditions tell us that there is predominantly detached single family in Buckeye, which has been proven to be successful as the community continues to grow. So our role is identifying some other ways that we can continue to grow and evolve to make sure that there's housing that is attainable for everybody. The last kind of piece here is I really want to distinguish between attainable and affordable housing. So affordable housing has certain state requirements that are necessary in order for it to be deemed as affordable. And so think traditional like Section 8 type housing or any sort of other subsidized housing program. What attainable is, housing attainability looks different for everybody. So it looks different for the family who is buying their forever home in Buckeye, or it looks different for the young professional who's just starting out in a career and has a great job opportunity out here in Buckeye and really wants to live and work in the same space and same city. And so really it's understanding and meeting people where they're at. So that's an important consideration as well. This will not create any sort of regulatory changes. It won't dictate where any new housing is built. No neighborhood changes will be made as a result of the adoption of this document. It is purely policy. And the other kind of element that I really want to hit on too is it's not only focusing on new developments. Buckeye has a fantastic existing housing stock, and so the best thing we can do for our community is provide some opportunities to continue to make that housing sustainable in the long run. What ways can we reinvest back in our neighborhoods and help provide maybe some incremental investment, and so the housing stock continues to be strong and aesthetically pleasing. So that first bracket there, what is the housing needs assessment? This really, again, is that quantitative piece. We take a look at the demographics of the community. How have they changed over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years? With Buckeye's outstanding growth, this is an important consideration given that the demographics have changed pretty significantly. And I'll touch on those here shortly. The housing needs assessment kind of looks for some of those gaps. Okay, where are we doing a great job? Where are there some opportunities to provide some or promote some additional housing types that might suit this particular demographic or income range? It really looks at who is currently living in Buckeye, who wants to live in Buckeye, and how can we make Buckeye a home for everybody? So this is really taking a look at those existing needs, those existing conditions, and figuring out what needs to happen to get us where we want to go. So from that report, if you've had a chance to kind of take a look through it, it is a pretty hefty document that we have here, and that was intentional. We wanted to make sure that we understood income. We wanted to make sure we understood housing characteristics. We wanted to make sure we understood employment trends, commuter trends. All of these factors really play into the different housing policies that we will inevitably be suggesting that Buckeye look to as the community grows. So that rapid growth and changing demographics, that's something that we talked about briefly before, but Buckeye is becoming a relatively young community. You have a lot of younger individuals in their 30s who are looking to either buy their first home or really establish a great life here. And so there has been a pretty significant rates of home ownership, which is a fantastic thing to celebrate. So as of 2022, over 85%, Buckeye had an over 85% home ownership rate, excuse me. That primarily has been a lot of modern stock, so it's been built in the past 10, 20 years, and it's been pretty undiverse. There hasn't been a lot of diversity. It's been a lot of detached single family, which again, we don't want to necessarily discourage because it has worked so well in the past, and there's certainly the demand for that. But we wanted to look to some existing opportunities and really identify where we can continue to grow and evolve. So that next phase, really looking at community engagement, it was really important for us to understand, from those who are living and working in Buckeye, what is your experience with housing? Are you a resident that's lived here for the past 20 years and you've seen Buckeye flourish? Or are you a new individual who just moved to Buckeye and bought their dream lot? What is your experience? How was that housing process for you? What have you noticed in your neighborhood that's grown and changed? What would you like to see? And so the first thing we did, we deployed a community survey. And thanks to the impressive efforts from the city's marketing team, we were able to spread that out on social media. We were able to distribute it to the senior center and other popular city locations so that there were hard copies available for folks who wanted to engage that way. And we were able to take in over 617 responses, and that is a tremendous effort from staff, and we are certainly very grateful to have had those responses and that support, because that helps us as consultants really frame out many of those policy recommendations. We also had 2 community meetings. Both had the exact same content, just posted in different locations. The first being May 12th, that was at City Hall East at the Landing. The second being at the Senior Center about 2 weeks later on May 28th. Really in engaging and talking with staff, we felt like that was an important population to really connect with. Senior housing is a very hot topic around the valley, but also here specifically in Buckeye. And so we wanted to make sure that we understood and had those conversations. So that last phase here is the housing action plan, and this is really where the meat and potatoes are. These are policy recommendations. These are looking at strategies, different ways to address the gaps and the opportunities that were identified through phase 1 and phase 2, that housing needs assessment and the community engagement. So our role as consultants is to go take a look through all of your adopted plans, policies, regulations, and see where we could find some maybe opportunities to improve or modify some of those actions there. And so we want to look to different solutions for availability, affordability, and our job is to connect with staff and council and the community to make sure that as we identify some of these implementation actions, we want to know what those most important factors are. And so we can help not just have a set of policies, but really be able to put them into action. And so this is that path forward, that roadmap that Andrea talked about for those future housing needs and efforts. The city of Buckeye has actually been one of the more proactive communities in the valley when it comes to initiating some different housing initiatives. Some examples of that, reduced fees within the downtown boundaries. Buckeye is also moving towards community development block grant entitlements. There has been a tremendous effort from staff and another consulting team to update the development code and really modernize some of those standards to help with things like housing affordability and availability, and we've been able to collaborate a little bit on that so that we can make some recommendations early on. Really looking at density bonuses within PADs and community master plans. Those have always been something that has been pretty successful with the development community to make that trade-off a little bit more financially viable. Buckeye is currently in compliance with all recent housing state legislation. There have been a number of changes over the past few years, and Buckeye has brought itself either through working with a consultant or independently into compliance with that legislation. And they're currently in the process of exploring streamlining final plats. So when we look at some of those attainable housing strategies, first one got caught up a little bit by that picture there, but we really want to leverage and capitalize on some of those catalytic development areas. And so there's a lot of work happening here downtown. This is a really hot spot, and there's a lot of growth opportunity here. The other space that there is a lot of development opportunity is really within that landing area. And so while we're kind of in the high-level planning phases of those efforts right now, really we have the opportunity to kind of introduce some efforts when it comes to planning for some diverse housing types. If we're looking for a pedestrian-friendly environment, then maybe there's some types of housing that we can do to potentially support that type of effort. In the downtown, really looking at things like some live workspaces, and so we can support some of those local entrepreneurs while also providing them with those housing opportunities there. Looking at things like development incentives, that doesn't necessarily have to be associated with any particular cost. Rather, it's looking at things like those development or density bonuses that we talked about before, or identifying maybe some potential waivers or expedited review processes, things like that to help make those costs a little bit more manageable. Again, with the development code updates, there have been a number of modifications, and we have been fortunate enough to partner and see some of those revised changes, and we're supportive of those. Looking at accessory dwelling units, potentially going through the process of creating some standardized plans for ADUs to help make that a little bit more of an attainable process for those interested in buying and adding on a unit to their home. looking at maybe some down payment assistance programs. There are a number of fantastic funding programs that could potentially be the key to helping continue with those high rates of home ownership here in the valley, and just help get some other folks kind of that give them that head start so that they can live in the community that they know and love. We also understand that the Human Services Department is continuing to grow and evolve, and so our role was really seeking some opportunities there to potentially help expand those services. So we intentionally kept the presentation pretty brief just so that we had plenty of time for questions, comments, if there were any sort of implementation actions or policies that you want to discuss. I appreciate your time, and certainly looking forward to some further discussion here. So thank you.
Thank you, Lainey. So thank you for that. And we just want to make sure that we have this open for questions that you may have. In the car, we did provide a copy of the draft, so if there was anything that stood out or you wanted us to elaborate on. Moving forward, just we're really staff is asking council for support on what proposed policy direction that we need to go move forward with. So one of the most exciting things is I know that the Housing Action Plan has been on the council's strategic, one of their goals to complete. And as we mentioned earlier, it just happened with the timing. There was a regional discussion, state law changed, and we took advantage of the MAG opportunity of getting a grant to help us with this process. So right now we are still collecting comments, and I am still providing some revisions to the consultant, to Matrix, and we have a lot of good stakeholders out there that have already provided comments. So we will be having a meeting in 2 weeks from now with Planning and Zoning Commission as well. We have shared the document with them, with Buckeye Main Street Coalition. So this way it also gives them an opportunity to make comments as well or ask questions. So once we've gone through those public meetings as well, we'll come back for council for their final adoption of the policy, so of the final version. So you will get that prior to the next council meeting that we put this on the agenda and ready.
Council, what questions we have? Councilman Good.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that this workshop would have kind of got into the data a little bit more. I did read through it once, and the data that was presented I thought was very interesting, especially around the demographic data, because that's driving your recommendations, and we really didn't get a lot of that here. So was there any big ahas in that data that you collected, not through the survey data, but more demographic, and was there any big ahas in there that helped drive some of these recommendations?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. I'll start by saying that, we know that Buckeye is one of the fastest growing communities in the nation. We knew that before we even started this. And so we came in, our job is to come in with a clean slate, and we say, all right, let's look at all the numbers, let's look at all the information, and let's see what it tells us. All those numbers supported that Buckeye is one of the fastest growing communities in the nation. I mentioned it a bit earlier, but Buckeye is becoming younger, the average age in the community. And so one of the aha moments, though, for our team was really still looking at that senior population. People like to live in Buckeye. People want to continue to live in Buckeye, and they want to reside there for the remainder of their lives. And so senior housing was an area that we noticed could be an opportunity for some additional growth in spaces. So senior housing currently is broken up into really two main groups, if you will. So the first being publicly funded senior housing and privately funded senior housing. There are some highs and lows with both of those, but what we're really missing is the gap there. And so that publicly funded senior housing is really primarily focused on more low-income individuals or those that qualify for state assistance, whereas that private care tends to be extremely costly. And so what we're missing is kind of that middle ground of sorts. We know that Victory has been a fantastic addition to Buckeye over the past decade. And so as people continue to grow and want to stay in Buckeye, we want to explore some opportunities to allow people to do that, who maybe aren't necessarily meeting those low income qualifications, but also can't necessarily afford to shell out thousands of dollars a month to be in any sort of state care. And so I think that was something that really stood out to our team as an important effort and something we wanted to continue to explore through this effort.
So there, and I wish I would have taken better notes when I read it, but there, older folks are moving here, right? So moving into Victory. So what you're talking about is they're aging out of their homes and can no longer live independently but need some assistance. Is that what you're
Certainly.
talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember. So a couple different factors there, and as we move through some of the policy recommendations, you'll notice that some points continue to pop up. There is a lot of crossover between recommendations, and so to answer the first part of your question, yes, we want to find solutions for seniors who have loved living in Victory or other parts of Buckeye and want to continue living in Buckeye, but don't necessarily have the means or the income to afford some of the higher end private care necessarily. That could look like a number of different things. The other thing that we really dove into in this report was people want to stay in their homes. And so if there is not the medical care and assistance that's necessary, there's some fantastic programs that can provide grant funding to the cities to administer to make incremental accessibility upgrades. And so that might look like a ramp in their home or a lift in their home, things like that. So as people continue to age, they might not necessarily need that, skilled nursing assisted care. Rather, there's that in between, and that's what we're really looking to target there.
At the other end of that spectrum, there was, I can't remember how you phrased it, incomplete housing, or where there was not the kitchen facilities or that didn't make it a complete home. And I don't remember the term that was used, but there was a chunk of housing within Buckeye that met that definition, but I didn't see a recommendation to help address that.
I unfortunately don't recall off the top of my head. Do you remember?
I mean, it's okay. I'm just,
But I'm happy to kind of come back with, an answer, solution, to make sure that we have recommendations in place to.
yeah, it may have been there, I just didn't see it, but it was, having looked at it, it's kind of a surprise to me that we have people living within Buckeye that are not living in a complete home. I've never seen it described that way, so, I think that's, to me, that's more of a concern than somebody aging out of a home in Victory, right? Is how do we level that up and where resources might be applied?
Absolutely, no, I appreciate that feedback, and we can certainly look into other funding mechanisms to help support that particular type of development is very niche, and so we can go in and explore some of those opportunities as well and make sure that those are included with the next draft of the report. So,
Thank you.
absolutely, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Do you have, are there any other slides that you all have that maybe talk about some of those ahas or the, I gotta be careful saying that, not the ahas, moments, or some of maybe the feedback that you got from the 617 respondents, or just the overall picture of housing. We know, like you've said a couple of times, that we're fastest growing. Single-family homes, we have an abundance of that, and we'll continue to build that into the community. But those other housing types that we need both at the lower end and the higher end. I know this doesn't generally tend toward the higher end. It's really the housing issues that we're experiencing in affordability and some of the key issues you talk about up front. But is there any more data that you can provide? It's a public meeting, and the opportunity to talk about it out loud in public in a workshop like this is pretty important.
Absolutely, if I could speak. So Mayor and Council, the housing needs assessment is where we collected all of our data in regards to what has been built, what we have in entitlement status, and so forth that we had to provide to the state. So I don't believe we have that on our website. We could put that there, but it is on the League of Cities website for all of the community. So for Buckeye, it identified a shortage of 2,840 units for today. And this is why the housing action plan is so important, is because moving forward, that number is going to increase, and which is projected to grow to 11,730 units by 2029. So what the data also, I would say the aha that I think I found interesting, like, we do have a really good opportunity that, we've been fortunate enough that we have that single family type of housing, and we do have a small amount of diversity, and we're seeing that diversity move forward. But one of the aha for me was we actually are lacking even the higher, the growth housing. So what happens when we start getting, our hospitals in and our professionals? Do we have that housing available for them? And, as we know, the market is always driven, or that's what we've always been told, by developers. Oh, the market, drives this type of development in regards to what size the lot should, we should be receiving, or, why multifamily is starting to come into Buckeye. So I think that was one of our big ahas. It's like, okay, so, when we were looking at this plan, I didn't want to just focus on affordability. And now that I'm thinking about attainability, I really like the word accessibility across all lifestyle ranges. So, whether, something that you need housing assistance to where you're a professional, depending on, so it's not just your demographics, but it encompasses, where are you working, what's your income, what are you looking for in Buckeye? The other aha, which I found really interesting, is when we went to the senior center. As we all know, we do have a new affordable housing multifamily in our downtown area, which we were really excited because right now, I did check there, I think at 90% capacity, which is really impressive, but it also just shows there is a great need. But what we were hearing from the seniors is that they're on a set income, and there's a few housing here in apartments that are also affordable housing, but they have found that their rents are going up as well. So, we really want this policy to be able to look at everything, and it's not just about the new build, but what types of programs. And that's how we collab with Human Resources Services in regards to, because they do have a lot of those programs that we can work together in this program. So we're looking at this as a whole. What kind of services can Buckeye start looking at? And then on the development, where can we improve our development code? Where can we have those incentives? how can we start gaining that interest from nonprofits and developers to start helping us move in that direction of providing diverse housing versus market rate housing. And then this way we could be able to fulfill our goals on moving forward. So we can accomplish that with this plan.
Yeah. And we're looking at this a little bit differently than we have ever have in the past. And generally in the past it's been, if you plat it, they will come essentially, and it's single family, go, go, go. This, and we as a city have really not participated in housing, aside from just be an entity that approves a land plan and the entitlements and the construction of single-family homes. So to start trying to drive more of the development or figure out programs or take, whether it's federal or state money, and help that, deploy that in the right location so that we can create that diversity of housing. This is a completely different step than I think what we've taken in the past as a city. So I think that's something we need to go to eyes wide open and make sure that the public understands we're doing what we can there. But at the same time, there's all kinds of market forces that right now are restricting our ability to build single-family homes, which is squeezing the market, which makes the prices go higher on single-family homes, and that is completely out of our control. And then there are programs that are, I think, going away, like the LIHTC, as I understand it, where that's not going to be available anymore. So housing developments like what you had, I think, referred to a little bit earlier that are just down the road, now there is no LIHTC component that helps that developer make that business plan make sense. And so it's going to be more and more difficult to build those type of projects within the city and create that diversity, not just right here in the downtown core, across the entire city of Buckeye.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may add to, that's where our role really is the most important. As you mentioned, there are some programs that are going away, and so our job is to basically give the city a toolbox and say, okay, if it's not LIHTC, then it can be X, Y, Z. Here are some great partnerships that you can explore. Let's start some great relationships with some fantastic nonprofits. Arizona Community Foundation, for example, pursued some fantastic grant programs in recent years that help with entitlements. And so it can help really for a lot of those projects that are qualifying as low income, things like that. And so as some of those organizations continue to adapt to evolving needs and evolving conditions, we really want to make sure that that relationship is established between staff and those organizations, and so those resources continue to be available, and Buckeye stays at the top of that list for the first group to call, for example. And so at the end of this, in addition to the implementation, it really is shaped out to be a set of tools and resources for the community to utilize at any stage wherever you may be with your housing journey.
I'm curious again, what the public's feedback was in those 617 responses. I know we get varied feedback all over the place, just depending on who it is that's chiming in. In some cases, I think we all realize that there's a definite need for a more diverse housing stock. When we talk about the multifamily or some of those types of housing stock, we're woefully underbuilt. And if any of them get built, you have public that are coming out of their shoes on, I can't believe we're building all this multifamily, and there's just way too much of it. But when you compare us to other municipalities, we are significantly underbuilt on projects like that. So there's room to grow, but it looks like when it's coming in near you, it's, oh my gosh, they're overbuilding this type of product. What has been the public's response? And in some cases, you have people that take a very rational approach and say, we need all housing types. We don't want to overbuild and just build an entire city full of multifamily and apartments, because that wouldn't be appropriate. But we don't want to be just single-family homes. What is the public saying in your surveys?
So, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first thing I'll share is that on the website, under the housing plan webpage, there is a community meeting summary. And so if there is the interest to kind of deep dive into some of those more specific comments, that is available for the public to review at this time. Additionally, there will be a full and complete appendix with all of the survey results too, and so that'll be included as well, so you can kind of see how folks responded to individual questions and comments. Generally, I would say with 619 comments, we had a range of feedback from the community. As you mentioned, there were some community members that were adamantly opposed to multifamily, even though that, you know, Buckeye is trending lower than many other neighboring communities in that field. And then there were some who were very supportive of things like additional density and additional multifamily. And so our job is to really look at what that middle ground looks like and what that range and how that range really translates to that housing plan. And so I would say for the most part, we had a pretty rational and response from community members in the sense that folks understood that there was the need for housing and housing solutions. Many of the comments that we received were, I love Buckeye and I want my kids to be able to grow up and have their own house here one day. And so there were plenty of individuals, I would say the bulk of responses in the community survey, but also at the public engagements were, hey, we want to explore this. We're open to that. We just want to make sure that it's appropriate and scaled to our neighborhoods. So if I'm in a single family neighborhood, I don't want a massive building in my backyard. Are there, right? I'm sure that's a comment that comes up quite a bit, but are there opportunities to potentially transition intensity between developments there? And so I think that there was a very proactive and responsive feedback from community members. They just wanted to make sure the big takeaway was wherever there's going to be more housing, more multifamily, that things like traffic were a consideration, things like safety and security were a consideration, but also that design and aesthetic portion that really draws folks out to Buckeye was maintained. And so all of those are certainly factors that can be mitigated or at least addressed as projects move through the entitlement process. So it was more so about scaling and location, which were really critical to respondents.
Can I go ahead and just share some numbers? I know everyone was really busy, but these were also included in our housing action plan regarding our meeting responses and a lot of our key findings. So 50%, and all of our responders were from the city of Buckeye. So 50% have resided in Buckeye for more than 10 years. So that shows that we do have a very strong community here. 80% of those respondents were 65 years or older. So we do have a large senior population. Let's see, I'm not going to go through all of it, but 38% of the respondents' household earned less than $30,000. So I really want that to sink in. Coming in as a young professional or just coming into the city of Buckeye, and we really do need that workforce housing for our teachers and our officers and and so forth, until they can actually, just grow into their housing. We did get 23% responded that they have limited consumption of food, medicine, and other essentials to cover their housing costs, which is, I kind of find that alarming. We shouldn't be struggling on, should I go and get food, or, do I pay my mortgage or my rent? 59% though did say their current housing is affordable based on their household income, but 23 did not. So, a lot of programs that we can also, maybe even introduce, and it doesn't always have to be through the housing action plan, but what kind of programs can we help our residents on learning responsibility and down payment assistance, and just helping them really understand that homeownership. And then in regards to just housing tenure, 54% own their home or live here, and then 21% rent. So 69% found that it was not difficult at all to locate in Buckeye. So that's good. That means that when they do look out here, it's not too challenging to find housing. 57% were satisfied with the current housing situation. I said there was 10% that was dissatisfied. 81% rate that the condition of their current housing was excellent or good. Now in regards to the housing types and priorities, 77% wanted Buckeye to prioritize senior living. And it might be a little skewed because we did have a lot of participation from the seniors. But they also asked about this meeting. We had reached out and said we're going to have a meeting at the landing. A lot of them don't drive, and they had asked us if we can go to the senior center. 34 did want more apartments. 32 wanted traditional single-family homes. 20% wanted duplexes, triplexes, or townhomes. So there's a variety of housing wants here in our community. 36% feel like their senior living facility best fits their household needs, and 53% prefer single-family home. I do want to say that being on the development services side, we do get a lot of calls. My children are graduating high school. They want to continue to live here. There isn't any housing stock for them. I recently just got a call from Victory in Dorado, and she goes, I love my community. My family lives here. I'm afraid, once I outgrow my active adult, she goes, do we have any assisted living? Do we have, that independent living or even memory care? And we actually do have that. But again, it's not because we have policies saying that, we need these types of housings or partnerships. And I think that's how this plan helps, is that we can do that. We can attract partnerships and developers to come in. Let's see if I have anything else. I'm not quite sure how much we have in time. So policies and services, 62% combined strongly agree, saying that the city should support incentives for developers to build affordable housing. 87% wanted senior expanded services from the Human Services Department. 56% wanted housing assistance, and 79% say that public transportation was very important as well. So those are some of the numbers that we had gathered from our survey, and that tells us a lot. That Lainey mentioned, that helps her group really try to focus on what types of policies that they should provide, discuss in our plan. And what I would like to do is, just invite council to really go through a lot of those policies, and then also the implementation schedule, because all communities are different. And if it doesn't feel like it's a right fit for Buckeye, or something that we're not going to be able to invest in right now, maybe we can find something that we would be interested or would benefit Buckeye, that we can add to our implementation schedule regarding housing.
Councilman Hayes has a question.
There's an assumption in this packet and this discussion here today that the city should get involved in these decisions. What is built here, who should live here, those kinds of things. So the fundamental question is, why should we get involved at all in trying to make those decisions when the market and the developers are already looking at these issues themselves.
I can get started, and if you want to jump in after, if you have any other contributions. Thank you, Mayor, Councilman. Housing is economic development. That's really what it comes down to, is for a long time, housing wasn't considered a critical part of economics and how a city can bring in money. But as Buckeye looks to bring in some additional industries, they look to bring in additional employers. There's some big names that, right, are coming into Buckeye. A lot of those important factors come down to, as those industries are seeking potential sites, they say, is there the housing to be able to support, you know, the workforce I'm gonna bring into Buckeye? Is there the income? I'm paying my workers a great wage, are they still gonna be able to afford to live in a house here? It doesn't necessarily mean that the city has to get involved with every aspect of it, but as a council strategic priority, really understanding the composition of housing in the community is so critical. Who's living here, who could live here, who wants to live here, right? Is the big takeaway. Beyond that, we also recognize that there is pretty limited city resources that can be allocated to these types of things. And so, as I mentioned before, our role is to come in and explore some different funding mechanisms and opportunities or partnerships so that it doesn't necessarily have to be staff's responsibility to facilitate, you know, housing somebody or, you know, helping a developer get started on the process. Rather have those relationships with those different organizations. And so as the city continues to grow and evolve, Buckeye is at the top of every organization that has, you know, funding in their pocket to help with just different housing solutions kind of come to fruition. And so that's my initial statement. Do you have any other notes you want to add?
Absolutely. So we actually received a comment from Economic Development because there was a section in here talking about workforce, and they say, you know, they actually hear a lot from employers, you know, what is available in Buckeye, you know, if I bring my company here, you know, will they be able to live there as well? And I think being able to have policies and direction, it also just gives us as a city tools to be able to help you know, guys, so like we can even, you know, in regards to the map that is provided here, we could say, you know, these are our core areas, this is where our workforce, you know, should be located. And it just gives us another attraction tool to help, you know, those companies come in as well to locate here in Buckeye.
So what difference does it make if the workforce lives in houses or condos? I guess what I'm saying, what difference does it make? If they're gonna pay their people good wages, what difference does it make? Why would we get involved? That's my question. It's more fundamental than that.
I think that it's a great question, and also too, different cities are in different places with their housing journeys, and so again, it doesn't necessarily mean that the city has to be at the front lines being the ones to build affordable housing. But as you kind of attract and seek those different employers, you know, there very well may be an opportunity where the cost of housing becomes too expensive that even the wages that they're, you know, these industries or employers are paying their people just can't keep up. And so to make the city money, you gotta kind of have that investment there.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilman, like I said, maybe I would just add a simpler answer that is, we're only required by the state legislature to understand what our housing challenges are. That's something that part of this, the first half of this process is. The second half is really to lay out the whole menu, and then we can start striking out things as a council we don't think are great opportunities for us, or adding things in that we hadn't thought of, or consultants hadn't thought of. As long as we annually talk about what challenges we think we're facing in the community, is aggregating their comments and providing to us, we're meeting the obligation of the state legislature. But how we choose to address it is really up to, like you said, the private market will dictate a lot of that, but also the council chooses to implement some tools, whether we're the partnerships that Laney mentioned, or if the council, through the retreat process or other directives to staff, decides to put any resources towards that, but that's entirely up to that decision-making.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we have, having 619 responses to things is good. But what I've noticed with a lot of those workshops and people coming is the people that are active and want to know about those things are answering those things, while people in Tartesso and Festival and Verado are going about their lives and they're not participating in those. So you're getting people, for instance, if you have an environmental issue and you have a meeting about environmental, the people that are really excited about environment are going to show up. So you're going to get kind of a skewed version of what they think is important. Whereas the rest of the people who aren't coming may not care about those issues and may not want those issues, are not going to participate. So it makes it look like there's more interest in it than is not. So what I want to do before we start getting into policy, I would like, this is good, having the information about what's out there and what's not out there and who's here and who's not is all great. But what I'm concerned about is thinking that I'm smarter than the market, that I'm smarter than the developers, that I'm smarter than all those out there who own the land and who want to do something they feel like they can make work. Now, can we get involved in when somebody brings something and they say, well, I could do this and I'm really interested and I think there's a market for this, but in order to make it pencil, I need a little help. Do you have a program? Certainly, I'm all for that, but actively pushing it, I would like to know more about what we should be concerned about as far as bringing the new companies in, bringing that industry in, what exactly they're looking for, and why what we have and what the market's provided so far isn't working. I would like more information on that before I would get involved in making any policies on it. I appreciate it, thank you.
Understood.
Councilman Quinn, do you have?
Yeah, I was gonna, similar comments than what Patrick had provided, but I think as we move forward on this, what would be helpful for me is the recommendations that come out of this plan. How do those match up with identified gaps that we have? I think that might help address some of the decisions that we may or may not be asked to make. If this is strictly an academic exercise that the legislature is requiring us to do, kudos to you, we've checked that box. But I think if we've invested time and money into this, then we really need to have a good discussion about it and make those decisions that are appropriate. I agree, the market drives this. They're going to dictate, is it senior living housing or is it workforce housing or the people that don't have a full kitchen. But we can create the environment that through code or incentives or whatever it happens to be that can help facilitate those decisions on behalf of the private market. But I think, I'm a data guy, so I want to see, where those gaps are, what recommendations are going to help fill those gaps and get to where we need to be.
Any other questions from council or comments?
I did have a question. Andrea, you mentioned earlier,
We're on time, so quick.
It's just the airport. This is more important.
Really?
the shortage. Speak more about, you said there's a shortage of housing, of units?
We're solid.
The unit shortage, yes. I can pull that number for you and provide it, but that was identified, Councilmember, as a part of the housing needs assessment, where those gaps lie. And so it might be just a shortage of specific housing types
Gotcha.
Based on income. And so happy to pull those numbers and provide those.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for the report. Lots more work to do.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all. Item 2B is a presentation and discussion regarding the airport master plan recommendations, revised airport layout plan, and long-range airport development plan. We have about 45 minutes, or as long as we want to this evening, to talk about the airport.
We're gonna sell it to build workforce housing.
We're going to do exactly that. You hurt my heart when you say things like that. Mr. Scott Gray, our airport director, will lead us through.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Again, my name is Scott Gray. I'm your aviation director, and I'm very excited to finally be able to be in front of you and talk about the airport. Here this evening to talk about the recommendations that came out of the airport master planning process. I have with me today Charlie McDermott from Dibble, that assisted in putting a lot of this information together. So I'm going to go through a few items for you today, kind of high-level information about what is an airport master plan, what it's not, the airport layout plan, some of these terms you've probably heard before, the long-range airport development plan, an upcoming study that will be about zoning and land use, the airport-specific area plan, what's the next steps to finish this master plan, and certainly questions. And again, if you have questions as we go through, please do not hesitate to jump in. So let's take a moment and talk about what is an airport master plan. It is a federal aviation required planning document. You generally do them about every 10 years, not necessarily required. You may do them a little bit faster. If development is happening, you may slow things down and not have to do one every 10 years. There's a very specific guidance provided by the FAA on what is in that document. It's usually several hundred pages or more, with several hundred pages of appendices to go along with that. It does identify the 20-year capital plan for the airport. So the planning period for a master plan is 20 years. It does identify the extent, type, and timelines associated with that type of development, both airside and landside development at the airport. And at the end of the day, the purpose is to identify projects that are eligible for federal funds. So if it's not identified in the airport master plan and then ultimately on the airport layout plan, which I'll get into in a moment, then it is not eligible for federal or state funding. Caution, just because it's eligible doesn't mean that we'll get it. We have to compete against all other airports nationwide in our region and in the state to be able to get those funds for specific projects. And then, as I mentioned, it supports the depiction on the airport layout plan, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a moment. What the airport master plan is not is a visionary document. It's not an aspirational concept plan. It is very specific to the FAA. Hence, maybe one of the reasons why we've been quite a while to get to the point that we are, but we found a way to blend in the visionary model with FAA's concurrence into the airport master plan as an appendix, and I'll get into that. And at the bottom there, it's hard to read, but the last airport master plan was actually completed in 2007. A lot of the projects that are on that plan are still in play today. So just a moment on the airport master planning process. It is broken into a number of phases. Pre-planning, as you do with all planning studies, and then the specifics that you see under 2, 3, and 4 are all very specific items that are included by the FAA that need to be included in the airport master plan to provide the justification for what is depicted on the airport layout plan. And you can see a list of things: inventory, forecast, facility requirements, capacity, all those types of things, and then alternatives. How are we going to make it work? Where does it go? And then lastly is what is the capital plan, and finalizing the document and then getting to the airport layout plan. Interesting enough, the FAA now requires a recycling and solid waste plan as part of the master plan. Kind of different, but Dibble is coordinating that with our environmental folks in the city so we can make sure that we meet that requirement. One of the things that I will talk about here, it was on the bottom of that slide, is the Planning Advisory Committee and the public involvement. There were 4 planning advisory committee meetings. There are 18-member committee, members of the city staff, FAA, ADOT. There's members of our tenant base, military, et cetera, that were on that. They review the documents as they're prepared, provide insight to our consultant on facts about specific to the airport that can be included into the document. Very valuable to have them involved. The second piece of that is the public involvement. We had 2 public information meetings. They're generally kind of an open house format. We kind of sort of did an open house format and a presentation format in the 2 that we had. Worked better for the number of questions that we had by the public. There were approximately 30 or 40 individuals at each of those 2 meetings. I think most of the council was at the last one that we had at the landing a couple months back. It was an opportunity to present the material to date to the general public of what we were looking at. Where we're at today, the last PAC meeting was just last week, was the last piece of the study in order for us to move forward to finalize. So I'll expect you to be able to read all of this. There'll be a test later on the specifics, but I just really wanted to point out the level of detail that's looked at when we do the airport master plan. First of all, the 3 airplanes you see over there on the left-hand side is what we would anticipate operating at our airport throughout that 20-year planning period. All general aviation aircraft, skydiving aircraft is the one at the top, and then business turboprop and jet aircraft will be introduced throughout the planning period. The rest of that information that you see there is a breakdown of the type of items that are needed both landside and airside throughout that planning period. And it may be hard to see, and I'll get into it in a moment, is it says PAL 1, 2, and 3, that's planning activity levels. A lot of times you'll see dates of years of, okay, this thing is needed in 2026. It's really not that specific. It's just easier for the general public to understand specific years, but it's really lumped into 5-year planning cycle, 5-year first one, 5-year second one, and 10-year for the last planning cycle. It's an opportunity to look at what activity levels are actually taking place, and then you slide projects around to meet that demand level. So the recommended airside development that came out of the study, I think the most significant thing, which is not typically done as part of an airport master plan, is the airspace and instrument for procedures analysis. We included Lean Corporation to do that analysis, a nationwide airspace expert, primarily to ensure that whatever came out of this plan and the long-range plan had no significant impacts to Luke's mission. That was one of our number one priorities, that anything that we do needs to be as minimal disruption to them as possible. We did present that study to them. They've provided comments back that indicates that it, certainly change is change, but they did not identify anything that would cause them any significant impact to being able to conduct their mission. So that was a high priority. It helped us align the runway in the future that had the minimal impact on them, and we'll get into what that looks like in some of the subsequent slides. But the primary runway, the runway that we have today, 1735, that's basically north-south, will remain our primary runway throughout the planning period. It is identified to have an 1,800-foot extension to the north. We are examining the possibilities to extend that even further to the north, because we will own that property all the way to the freeway, allowing us maybe some additional opportunities for other users to utilize our airport as we move forward in the planning period. That airspace analysis did identify the location for the crosswind runway. So the needs for a crosswind runway is to meet our wind coverage. So in smaller aircraft, wind is significantly hampers your ability to land. So if you're landing and the wind is blowing directly from the east and you're landing to the north, it's coming directly from your side, At any kind of speed, that can be challenging to utilize the airport. Some pilots choose to go land somewhere else during those types of weather events. Our goal here was to be able to accommodate all of our users at all weather events, and that would be by adding that crosswind runway, which was identified as runway 1028. And again, it's basically east-west. And I'll show you some pictures of that. The alignment is towards the south side of the airport property that we have today, and it was identified initially to be a 6,000-foot runway. The landside development to go along with the support of the airside, number one is an air traffic control tower. We are a very busy airport. We had 12,000 operations last month and we were closed for a week. That's probably one of the highest level activity levels we had. We're on target for 140,000 operations this year, up from 122 last year and 95 roughly the year before that. So significant activity is taking place at the airport, and it's important that we get an air traffic control tower. Conventional hangars, which are large hangars, executive hangars, and T hangars were identified to fill the needs of based aircraft and maintenance facilities, etc. Additional apron and tie downs. Opportunity for non-aeronautical development opportunities, primarily along Palo Verde Road towards the entrance, and then obviously additional access road and taxi lanes to get to the facilities. So this is the draft of the airport layout plan. So the several hundred pages of documentation in the master plan is all to support what is identified on here. And I have some subsequent pictures where it'll be a little bit easier to see, but what you see in the gray is what already exists. What you see in the blue would be what will be added in the future. And then you see some in the red as well, which is additional projects. This particular document is one of approximately 20 or so sheets that identify that development over time. It'll include airspace sheets zoomed in on land side. It'll have land ownership of what is owned by the airport. It's called Exhibit A, that is needed every time we apply for a grant, as well as land use on airport as well. So just to make it a little bit easier, it's got the background makes it a little bit easier, and it's broken into those planning activity levels I spoke of earlier. You might be able to see there's some specific dates on some of those projects. Again, the specific date is really irrelevant. It's mainly there as just kind of a timeline builder, but those projects can be slid around based on the demand as it arrives. So if we have a new user that comes to the city, says we would like to be at your airport, but we need X, and X was identified to be 5 years from now, then we would work with our funding partners to try to adjust our capital program to slide those projects forward to help meet that earlier demand. This particular picture here is the first 5 years. You can see to the north, the red area is the land acquisition that we've already purchased or just about ready to finish the last sliver of that. You can see the Yuma Road green alignment because you can't have a roadway in your runway protection zone. The bright green you see towards the north there, that is the proposed runway extension. It takes it to just about Yuma Road. And then a lot of the other projects you see airside are really maintenance related projects. The red on the taxi lane is reworking the taxi lane, and the same with the yellow on the existing runway is a rehab project. That pavement is 30 years old and it will need to be rehabbed. On the land side, you can see some of the dash lined areas. That's for hangar development. We do have a couple of, let's just call them RFPs on the street that came back with some interest to develop hangars, and we're working towards those agreements to allow that to happen. And then you can see some additional bright blue there, kind of right in the middle is additional apron space for additional parking for aircraft as we move through the first 5 years. This is the second 5 years. You can see it's really moving down to the crosswind runway, which you see down there on the south side in the blue, running direct east-west for the most part. That's the primary airside development, and then you can see additional apron space and hangar space development for landside. You can see kind of a yellowish color. I don't know if this pointer, maybe, look at that, right there. That is for helicopter operations, so separating helicopters from the fixed wing and providing them an operating area is what that identifies there. And then lastly is the last 10 years, and again, really this is just fill-in for the most part of additional aircraft parking locations. And then you can see a little bit more apron, and then you see a little bit of development there on the air side, which is basically taxiway exits off the runway for corporate airplanes. As the corporate airplanes start to arrive, that allows them and or smaller airplanes to exit the runway faster so additional traffic can utilize the runway. So I'm sure this one is a very interesting slide, is the anticipated cost. So just going down to the bottom line on the total, you can see the planning activity level breakdown there. Approximately $179 million is the total cost for the 20-year development. Nearly $90 million of that identified for potential funding from FAA. Almost $7 million from the state, $20 million local. That would be city matches to those grants, as well as non-grant eligible projects. And then lastly, other is really the private sector. So those would be private hangar developments that the city wouldn't participate in. The city will focus more on the infrastructure side, and the private sector will construct some of those other facilities that would be for aircraft storage. Just to give you an example of the previous master plan, in 2007, that total cost was $110 million. And again, a lot of those projects are still remaining to be done. Obviously, we've seen cost escalations quite a bit since 2007. And I think the city match at that particular time was about $2.5 million.
Scott, that crosswind runway is contemplated in one of these, is that correct?
Correct. It was in the second planning phase.
PAL2.
Correct.
Okay.
I think it was actually almost just after 5 years, probably identified at 6. Again, the reason it's extended out a little bit further, a lot of times, somebody like myself that's been doing this for a long time, I'd be out there constructing the runway today because we could use it. Our users could use it today. What hampers that ability to do it that quick is some of the processes we have to go through. We have to do environmental design, all kinds of things that take quite a bit of time to get through on the planning side just to get to the construction side. And some of these things require a significant amount of money. So let's just use the crosswind runway as an example. It could be a $20 million project just for that one runway. That would include everything, right? The taxiway, the runway, the land we need, et cetera, et cetera. FAA is not going to give us $20 million. They don't do that to general aviation airports. What we'll likely see is we'll get a couple of $1 million here to start doing the planning or whatever we need to do the design. Then we'll have a couple $1 million to do grading. Then we'll have several $1 million to build the runway, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's usually phased in over time by the FAA, just because it's very difficult to get that level of funding up front for the entire project. So generally speaking, when the FAA starts that phasing process, they're committed through the end of that project. So if we can get them to start working on that sooner, then that's just showing our commitment that we're going to keep moving forward, and they'll keep providing ample amount of funding to keep going with that project. These are estimated costs. Yes, sir.
So this anticipates that the design and the environmental and all that
This is all in, yeah.
will start taking place in the 2030 second phase.
For the second runway?
Yeah.
The second runway, yes. Now, my guess is we'll be able to start some of the environmental process sooner. And again, because we have a demand, we'll get in line for the grant funding to do those studies. So we've already had those conversations with the FAA. Some of the work that we're doing in the first 5 years is really kind of catching up to some of those projects that did not get completed in the previous master plan. So we're focused on those to provide us a really good foundation for growth moving forward. It also shows our commitment as the city to the FAA that we're investing into our airport and taking it to the next level. So we stand a better chance to get that federal funding for the next projects. So I mentioned earlier that the master plan is not a visionary document. This is. This is the visionary document. This is not something that a lot of communities do. And for Buckeye, it is a critical piece to the ultimate success of our airport because and you've heard different words. We'll call it greenfield. We'll call it all kinds of things that we have the opportunity to mold that a lot of the airports in this valley probably did back in the 70s and the 80s. If you look at Williams Gateway, I had the privilege of working on the conversion plan from military to civilian on that airport. That was 25 years ago. They have hit their stride now, 25 years later. So it takes some time for some of these things to take place. But the thing that we were able to do in this particular study is convince the FAA to put it in as an appendice to this document that allows us to pull pieces from that if we see that happening a lot easier than saying, oh, we're starting to see this, now we got to do another master plan, or we got to do an update, now we got to spend another year or two doing planning process. This provides us a nice bridge to maybe pull some of these things forward. So what is this long-range airport plan? It's beyond our 20-year horizon, right? It's 20, 40, 50 years, whatever it may be. It may be 18 years, right? It just depends on the demand as it starts to take place in our community. It does identify kind of similar things as an airport master plan, except it's more visionary. Visioning demand scenarios, again, facility requirements, what would we need, the alternatives to meet that need, what's the implementation plan, and then what's that airport layout plan look like if that were to take place. And that is included in our airport layout plan set as well, and I'll show you that picture here momentarily. Yes, sir.
Is this a prescriptive outline, or is it just a working outline that we have?
This is what we did in that study specifically. There is no guidance on what this study does or doesn't include because the FAA does not adopt this plan or does not necessarily use this plan for their funding purposes. We would have to pull those into the master planning arena.
So as a follow-up to that, have we done or do we plan on doing an economic impact?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, that will come. We actually have a subsequent study that meets the council strategic initiative. We have another airport strategic initiative, and that process is in underway. We have to get our baseline,
right,
so we can then do that next piece. But this will include some of that. And some of the primary goals here was to identify the ability for commercial service, air cargo, military, corporate business users, urban air mobility and advanced air mobility, which is certainly a big topic, and then again some additional non-aeronautical development. And as I mentioned, this is going to be an appendice of our document, so it will live and breathe with our master plan. Gives us a little bit more flexibility, which we were pleased that the FAA allowed us to do that. Originally, it was likely going to be a standalone document, which then means it's completely separate. It helped us quite a bit to do that.
So one more question on the economic study. Is that economic study taking into account those uses, or is it taking into account what we have in the general plan separate from the long-range airport development?
So when you say general plan, Mayor, are you talking about the master plan?
Master plan,
Okay, yeah. The economics will be for our existing ability and our future ability. So that plan will also include what's the cost, how do we get there, things of that nature, just like we would in a master plan. It's just not adopted the same way. So it is more high level, right? So as we see things happening, so let's just pick on commercial service for a second. Southwest Airlines isn't gonna come knocking on the door and say, okay, I'm gonna do 100 flights a day next year. It doesn't work that way. It took Gateway probably 14 years to get their first commercial service activity, and it was smaller aircraft, smaller market type stuff. Those kinds of things actually could start taking place with our runway extension. If there's a user that comes to us, there's a number of other things we have to do. We have to have safety and security improvements to meet the FAA requirements for what's called FAA Part 139 and TSA, all the other things that you see at all the commercial service airports. We'll have to get through that. But a smaller operator could do commuter service, say to Southern California, as an example, using a smaller airplane, similar to what you saw in our forecast. Could be 19 passenger airplanes, it could be regional jet, you know, they operate those out of Flagstaff. That takes an operator willing to do it. It's very difficult to convince the airline to come to your market. They have to be able to feel comfortable that your market can support it. And they have a lot of statistical data of what they need to see and the number of people that live here, businesses, et cetera, that they go through all those numbers to say, okay, this is what it takes. Every airport in the country that has commercial service wants Southwest Airlines. Not all of them have it for that particular reason, because Southwest can't make the numbers work. You're also seeing some of the other carriers that are starting to disappear once again, because sometimes the market changes. So this document here will fulfill the opportunity to identify the types of additional airside facilities and landside facilities we may need, and the types of users and the forecast of activity that go along with that. Again, air cargo could be the same way. It may start off with smaller air cargo operations to smaller markets and then expand from there. Just the pictures on the left gives you kind of an example of the airplanes we were talking about and maybe some of the airplanes that we may see in the longer term. You see the large airplane in the third one down is a typical cargo aircraft that you would see at Sky Harbor today with the amount of warehousing and so forth that is taking place in the West Valley. This may be an opportunity to explore, and then certainly larger general aviation jets, as you see on the bottom. The recommendations that came out of this was that runway alignment we talked about from the airspace study is 1028. It gets extended out to 8,800 feet. A small parallel training runway is added. We start to see ourselves transitioning probably from our 1735 to going to these as our primary runways as we get into this phase.
The east-west.
Sorry?
The east-west.
Correct. So the 1735 north-south runway, at some point in time, probably will go away. And the north side of that runway area then will be used for additional development, supporting air cargo, military, etc.
Scott, just real quick, can you, just for everybody's benefit, speak to the 1.7, what is 1.7, what is 3.5, what's 10, what's 2.8?
Sure. So 17 is the magnetic heading, 1.8 would be directly south, 3.6 north. So it's basically north-south for the general public, north-south. 927 is directly east-west. We are at 1028. So we're just canted 10 degrees for both of our runways. So north-south is what we have now. East-west is what will ultimately be these longer runways, which again, from the airspace study, has the least amount of impact on our military neighbors to the north. This does identify 10,500 foot runways, which would support cargo, passenger service, military, etc. I'm sure it could be phased in over time as well. And then additional development areas to accommodate all of that commercial activity. And here's what that picture looks like. Again, I apologize for it being so small. But you can see the two large runways there on the south side. Those are the 10,500 foot runways. You see that taxiway that's not quite in the middle. That is that parallel runway that was built early, and then it's converted to a taxiway, so that pavement is continued to be used throughout the rest of that planning period. You can see that orange area to the north. That's where the primary commercial service, cargo, military-type activity would take place. The proposed connection to I-10 there, about the top middle of that page with another exit there, another one over at Johnson, would allow access to that area directly off the freeway. And then everything over on the east side that you see in blue is just additional expansion area for general aviation use in the future, and then the pink areas are for non-aviation development. Could be any types of non-aviation. In other words, non-aviation meaning they don't need to get an aircraft to and from that location. Maybe aviation related, could be offices for manufacturing offices, et cetera, but they don't have to get an airplane to and from it.
Scott, that plan shows kind of split the difference between Alberti and Johnson, but that could slide either way.
That's correct. For planning purposes, we split the difference, put it right in the middle. It really can go all one direction or all the other direction. I know there's proposed development on both sides, so as time goes on, those decisions can be made, whether both roads should be moved or just one. There's other opportunities for tunneling roads and things of that nature they've done at a number of airports. Certainly comes with an expense that hasn't been identified here. It's just relocation opportunities.
And that 10,500 could be more.
Certainly. This was shown at 10,500 as time goes on, just like they've done at Sky Harbor. Over the years, the runway kept getting longer depending upon the types of aircraft that they had there. 10,500 foot under today's scenario would cover just about any aircraft that operates today in the commercial air cargo arena. We should be able to handle it with that. As things develop in the future, as we've seen over the last several decades, aircraft get more efficient, they operate better in either temperature or whatnot, and sometimes runway length isn't required. So it may be by the time we get here, that length is not necessary, but it certainly is a planning criteria that we decide to identify to meet current demands today if it were to happen. So the next piece, if we haven't had enough planning going on, so those are two studies embedded right there that we just talked about, the master plan and the long-range plan. The next one, which is actually out on the street now for selection, is the airport-specific area plan. As the city is the sponsor for our airport to the FAA to receive funds, we are required by the FAA and the state to control land uses around the airport. This study will help us do that. It will identify compatible land uses and zoning. This study is being headed up by Brian's team in Development Services, and Adam Copeland is taking the lead on that, and I'm certainly working in conjunction with them to ensure that the airport pieces are connected there. As you can see on the third bullet, the master plan, long-range plan that we just talked about will provide a lot of that documentation that they need for height zoning and noise contours, et cetera. That's all coming out of our document, so they don't have to redo that. And then one of the things that we will get out of that, in addition to the specific area plan stuff, is a height and noise overlay zoning ordinance, and then also a new airport area, influence area that's required by the state real estate department. We will update the one that we currently have on file. So what's the next steps here is to finalize the airport master plan. As I mentioned, we've completed all of our planning committee meetings and our public outreach. We're here this evening to see if there's any additional information provided by the council. We will then finalize the airport layout plan, and then we will bring this document back to the council to adopt the study. My guess is sometime in the November timeframe. We will be submitting the airport layout plan to the FAA for their adoption. That can take anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. The timing is really kind of irrelevant because we're going to move forward as if it's completed. Where the line specifically is on that plan may change slightly, but it won't have any impact to what we're looking at in the planning period. So the FAA will go through that. And then, as I mentioned, the airport-specific area plan Selection will be here shortly, and then that study will take about 9 months, and then implementation after that. And I wished I had the picture of our brand new markings, which those are the old markings. The new markings actually have a bunch more of white stuff out there for the non-aviation folks that allow us to have instrument approach procedures that we do not have. All the other airports in the valley have instrument approach procedures allowing our operators to operate in poor or low weather conditions. The FAA already flight checked and confirmed that we were good to go. They got one more flight check to check our lighting and stuff, and then those are proposed to be published in March. And we should see, that is, although weather here isn't really a problem like we have across the country, it is something between runway length, air traffic control, and having instrument procedures. Those are key pieces for corporate operators to feel comfortable using your airport. Not that we don't have corporate aircraft using it now, but as we start to continue to develop, I think we'll start to see a little bit more shift into the commercial arena. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from council? Oh, hurts my heart when he said
I believe he said more, yes.
The advisory committee we talked about for the master plan, who did that consist of?
There were 18 individuals, a number of folks from the city, certainly our consultants, military being Luke, and the International Guard Chief of Staff, members from FAA and ADOT, the National Business Aircraft Association, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, our tenants, and our other consultants.
Okay, I have to tell you, Scott, that I'm a little disappointed to not be included in that. This is my district, and I did ask whenever we were going through this exercise that I'd be included in that. So in the future, can we please do that?
Sure, and certainly that was not out of disrespect, sir. We always try to keep the council informed. These particular things are generally don't include political folks, but certainly I'm available at any time to provide any briefings on all the things that are going on at the airport. Whether you've got the time to be at these, we certainly invite council to be at our public information meetings, which we present the same information, it's just not in the weeds. But certainly there was no disrespect there. So
These were not public meetings, right?
These are not.
Yeah, they're
the two public meetings, we certainly advertised and saw most of you at those, and we appreciate that.
And moving forward with the area plan, what is the, going to engage stakeholders in the area?
Sure, yeah, again, that plan will be headed up by Adam and his team and the consultant that's hired there. There will be significant outreach to all the property owners that are there and information meetings that will be making a list. As a matter of fact, we're looking at what all those property owners are now so they can be on the list to be notified of any public meetings we have on that study. I'll just be kind of assisting on the aviation side for the planning department on that particular document.
Can you go back to the last long-range plan that you showed? That's really the money shot right there. And I know we're talking 20 years out for less than that, but if you have users that are coming along that say, we want exactly that and we'll come to your airport, we're not talking 20 to 40 years out for a variation of the plan. It could be in the next several years that potentially we've got uses that come this way. Maybe it's not passenger, but some pretty significant aircraft that might be interested in being a part of that.
Yeah, and some, depending upon the aircraft type, could start using the airport with the existing runway and then transition to the other one. Now we actually have activity levels at the airport that justifies the need, which makes it much easier for the FAA then to advance that funding. Again, the funding's never going to come fast enough, So it's on us as staff to be watching what's going on, working with economic development. When these players are coming to the table saying we need X and Y, how we get there, documentation from those interested in moving their companies here, that they have an aviation need, that helps us then go to the FAA and say, look, we've got these folks moving their corporate offices, they're going to be building it here, this is what they need, and that helps us then move these projects a little bit quicker.
I think it's important that we publicize this as big and loud as we can. That this was really the intent of the whole. We could have not done the master plan and just created this document. And that's what we need to go out to users so that we can show them this is the plan for when we grow up, which could be 4 years from now, it could be 30 years from now, when that is. But without the vision cast, we have nothing to show Uncle Jeff or whoever's wanting to spend money in moving goods and services and people in and out of an area.
Yes, I mentioned.
I think, hold on, I think also what we have got to nail down is not only are we gonna grow, we're gonna be 300,000 people in 15 years, but the entire West Valley is gonna be growing. And I think with a document like this and robust plans like this, we have an opportunity as a community to go out and ferret out those opportunities and drag them in. Not sitting back and waiting for Southwest to hopefully come out one day. Don't care if they do or not. There are a lot of airports that fly that are small airports that have passenger traffic that's going in and out. And we have an opportunity to go out and make that happen, not sit back and wait for that opportunity to come to us, whether it's passenger or cargo or military operations or whoever that is in the future moving forward. And then the area plan is going to be very important, but I think what we need to do is start claiming areas here and maybe talking with some of those potential users that are out there. So not only that orange area that you have up there, I think that's fantastic, but we probably could use area around the southern part of the runways and start maybe visioning what that looks like moving forward, so that we're not going to go out and purchase that property, but just making sure everybody understands this is the vision and the size of what we're talking about for the future Buckeye International Airport. And it's not a, and you only have to have one scheduled international flight to be an international airport. I don't know. We could just schedule our own, but it's really seizing the opportunity for that greenfield development and claiming this area, staking a flag out here so that it doesn't get gobbled up by just willy-nilly development that we can't control moving forward.
Yes, and this plan will be used for that area, specific area plan to hopefully protect against incompatible land uses and things like that. As growth happens, as you see at every airport, there's houses. I hated to follow the housing because houses and airports don't go together that great, but they all grow towards the airport. Denver bought 50 miles out of town and they've got houses on the fence line. So it just happens naturally, but doing this visionary document here and then following that up with the land use and zoning will help protect us into the future.
Yeah, and it's not just protecting against the uses that are out there, because you can put a compatible use on the south, actually in that orange area, that has nothing to do with aviation. And that's not what we want. The idea is to claim as much real estate as we can so that we can, I think Sky Harbor right now would say we would love to have more property to expand their operation even more. We have the opportunity to set aside property for airport uses, not just it's okay to have warehouses there because those folks are not going to call me in the middle of the night and complain about the jet noise and such. So I mean, as much as we can do to broadcast this to everybody out there so that folks know this is the plan for Buckeye Airport moving forward. And at the same time, talking to those users and landowners around, saying we want to stake our claim or your claim, so that maybe there's, I don't know, eventually through the fence agreements, or there's participation in airport property, that whatever that looks like in the future, just making sure that our vision is big, and we're taking steps to make sure that that vision comes to play.
Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, total acreage of what you're looking at there in comparison to Sky Harbor?
Do you know the size of Sky Harbor?
No, I know.
1,100 acres sounds familiar, but I think this is about 1,600 acres.
I think if I remember doing really bad mayor math on you do areas on the assessor's website, and from Yuma to the canal, from Johnson to Palo Verde, it's about half of Sky Harbor, I think.
This is a pretty large development area for an airport.
According to a quick internet search, Sky Harbor Airport is 3,400 acres.
So about half. Thank you. And internet doesn't lie.
Never does.
Google Search.
And they're hammered.
Any other questions, council? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Oh, when does this get the final approval from our friends at the FAA?
It's, at the rate things have been going, they've been very, very slow in turning things around. So we'll turn it in here probably in the next month or two, and they'll have it for at least 3 months, maybe 9 months. But as they're doing that, we consider the project done. We're moving on.
Okay.
We may just move the lines a little bit on the ultimate plan, but it's not going to change the general.
There's no need to wait for the final approval.
No, sir.
No.
So we can go out and advertise right now. This is.
I'll be back to let you adopt this plan, the completed document, as our guidance moving forward. Probably come in, I'm guessing, November to bring that forward, and sometime that'll go to the FAA at the same time. But we'll consider it complete as soon as you say it's adopted, and that's what we're going to be marching for.
Can we just vote on that right now?
You're the boss, sir.
Make a motion.
Scott,
Mr. Attorney said, he winced a little bit when I said that. Very soon. Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the work for this. Okay, item number 3, with nothing else on the agenda, we are adjourned.